Hey, it's Yury Experience, and today we are talking about my experiences as a Jew. Yury Experience. For those of you who don't watch me from the very beginning, you probably don't know that I'm a Ukrainian Jew. And as I say Jew, I don't mean it in a religious way, but I mean it in terms of heritage and nationality. In my case, this question of nationality and heritage is difficult anyway. By Jews, nationality and heritage is normally given further through the mother. So if your mother is a Jew, then you are a Jew. By most of the other nationalities, the situation is different. For example, by Ukrainians. By Ukrainians, if your father is an Ukrainian, then you are an Ukrainian. But by Jews, as I told you, due to historical reasons, the situation is different. And since mother of my mother is a Ukrainian, for you conservative Jews, I'm not a Jew. On the other hand, for Ukrainians, I'm definitely a Jew because my father is a Jew. Because of how I was growing up, I decided to define myself as Ukrainian Jew. Somehow I connect to this term better than I connect to a Jewish Ukrainian, or just Ukrainian, or just Jew. I think it comes from the fact that I was growing up in Ukraine and I had a lot of Ukrainian friends, a lot of friends with that kind of culture. On the other hand, in my family, we had a lot of Jewish culture, some Jewish traditions. We are not that religious, but still there are some cultural things that you just do. And all members of my family are proud to be Ukrainian Jews. So I don't see a reason why I shall hide it or why I shall not be proud of that. On the other hand, it's not that I'm like, woohoo, Jews, 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 and you will not find out that I'm Jew just from looking at me. I'm not that kind of person who thinks that my nationality or heritage defines everything about me. But it definitely has some influence on me, and during my years growing up I had a lot of Jewish and Ukrainian influence. None of my parents really wanted me to be religious, which is why I've never become a religious person. And although I know a lot about Christianity or Judaism, I'm not a person who can associate myself with them, at least at this moment of life. But I do have a lot of relatives that are religiously Jewish. My biggest example was always and will be always my aunt who lives in New York, and her whole family is religious Jewish. And that's kind of a cool fact, and they literally live along the rules of Judaism, with kosher food, with doing Shabbat every Friday evening. It's a different way of life. I lived by them a couple of days, a couple of weeks. It's interesting. It's not that I want to do right now, but it's also not that difficult, and it actually makes a lot of sense. At least from my perspective. Another thing that I want to cover in this video was my trip to Israel. It happened not so long ago. It was New Year's Eve and Christmas. The trip was free, and I'm still thankful for Birthright Israel. It's a program that allows people with Jewish heritage to visit Israel completely for free once in their life. And it was freaking great. It was one of the best trips in my life, and there are a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, that I have to say, people were great. Our whole group of people, we were more or less on the same wave, It doesn't happen a lot. I have a lot of experience in traveling, and that was really interesting combination of people. We were 30 people who were more or less, we could understand each other. It was quite great group. Also, we have a lot of Israelis there, and that allowed us to have conversations with them and to gain new experience. What is real life in Israel looks like, because it's always nice to hear some stories from news and whatever, but I always am more interested in real stories of real people, of the people who are actually living in the place, because I value these stories way more than just some stories that I've heard somewhere from somebody. And speaking from this kind of people experience, overall, this whole Israel trip was one big new experience for me. First, I've never been to Middle Eastern countries, which is why, it was new cuisine, new kind of nature. There were desert, and we spent a night in a desert, and it's wow! Second, overall culture, overall cuisine, overall feeling, it's really interesting. It's different from what I'm used to. I lived and visited mostly West European countries and USA, and the feeling of life in Israel is different. And since I touched the topic of Israel, I assume we will want to know my opinion about Israel, Jewish-Arab conflict. And first and foremost, before I say anything, I think that you need to be respectful to all the other opinions, be it mine or be it of other people in the comments. You may not agree with me, which is okay, but I just want you to stay respectful. And in my personal opinion, A, Israel is a country that exists, it's a country that was fought for, and the country which was created after people won some kind of war. B, I'm not a great Zionistic person, I don't think that you just necessarily have to have their own land, but I also don't think they don't deserve have a land. It's like, I'm just not a Zionistic person. I enjoy the fact that Jews have their own land, but it also was never like a big thing for me. And third, based on my experience and based on people's experience that I talked to, and definitely I didn't talk to enough people, but most of the people want peace. They want life, they just don't want any more death. And I agree the situation is very difficult in there and the views are really different depending on who you will ask. However, I do really hope that this overall conflict can be resolved and will be resolved before the moment I will die. And I think it's possible, it's my personal opinion. That is more or less my experience. If you have questions about that, be it questions about religion or about my trip or something else, write them in the comments below. I will gladly answer them, or I will just find information about them because I think it's easier for me than for you. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, maybe subscribe, because I do a lot of videos about different topics on everyday basis. You will definitely find something interesting for you. Yeah, that's all for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.